We debated for quite a while as to what to call this video. Music education kind of sucks, I guess, is what we settled on, because that's what we want to talk about, maybe? So, honestly, this might end up being a long video. Obviously, you already know how long it is. I kind of just want to talk about how music is taught, and being a music educational channel, I guess we have a little bit now of experience in teaching music and kind of how we do it. So, we kind of just want to chat about how the mainstream does it, I guess. How does the educational system teach music?
Why don't we start off by saying what did you do in your music education, Lanny? What have you been through?
Okay, primary school, we very rarely did music at all. If we did, we had like this little trolley that had like fucking maracas on it and shit.
Yeah, we had the same thing.
Basically no music education in primary school whatsoever. So that was up to age 11. And then at 11 went to secondary school, where we had 3 years of not exams, just learning with no purpose. Where the only thing I really remember doing in music was we made up a jingle. We were set a task to advertise a random product with a jingle that would appear on a radio. I don't really remember a great deal else. We did stuff like you do tea, coffee, tea, or something as a representation of rhythms.
Like tea, coffee, tea, and then you do cream. That's just the long one.
Yeah, I don't actually remember a great deal about that kind of thing. It didn't stick, whatever it was. That stuff I've since learned through other methods, and it stuck with me because of that. Then you move on to the thing that I guess the main bulk of what we're going to be talking about today, which is GCSEs, which is the exams that we take in the UK as 16-year-olds, and that's the qualification that in theory will get you into college, which is what we do when we're 17 and 18, 16, 17, 18. That's the point where you get to choose everything that you're going to do for the rest of your life is now your choice. So the GCSEs are alongside English, math, science, all that kind of thing. I did GCSE music, where it was kind of the theory of music, and we did a little bit of songwriting, like we did a composition for a quartet. I think it was a quartet plus marimba plus piano. We got to do a bit of a composition for it. I mean, we'll talk about this later, but we did a lot about how other people have written music and that side of stuff, as opposed to writing music ourselves.
I did relatively the exact same thing as you, except I did BTEC music instead of GCSE, which was more about how the music industry works, learning about how to put on live shows, things like that. So stuff that was actually sort of relevant to kids at the time. Yours wasn't really.
No, not necessarily. We have here a AQA, which is I'd probably say the biggest exam board in the UK, or the school that we went to. Most of our exams were done through AQA, so it's a big exam qualification giver. So we have their AOSs, they're called. They're just like the key subjects that will be taught and learned for this qualification. There are 5. AOS 1 is rhythm and meter, 2 is harmony and tonality, AOS 3 is texture and melody, AOS 4 is timbre and dynamics, and AOS 5 is structure and form.
They're like the first 5 things that a student will learn in music education.
Yeah, they're I guess the basics of how a song is made up. If you have every song has those 5 things. So I guess that's a logical thing that people have come up with to be like, that's how we're going to teach music. We're going to start on that, we're going to start on that, we're going to start on that, and we're going to start on that. And we were talking about this earlier, about kind of how I want to formulate this video. And the one thing that we kind of, or I guess I kind of deviated towards, was teaching all that stuff first, or at least that's the entire thing that's kind of taught about music, is you're missing the point, because music is really fun. We do this channel and we make music and all that stuff because it's kind of fun. It's rewarding. Music is fun to play. It's rewarding to hear back your own thing and be happy with it and all that kind of thing. And I think that was a big problem with the music educational system that we came through, is that it kind of misses the point with that bit. I remember in year 9, which was the year before we started GCSEs. That year before we started the GCSEs, I was in kind of a group that was called Performing Arts, and it was essentially whenever you had music or drama or art, I was in like a top set. Everyone else would do kind of like a basic thing, and anyone who was in performing arts would do a more advanced version because they were seen as being good at least 2 of the 3 arts. It did make it a little bit more complicated for people who were good at drama and art to then come over to music and didn't know what they were doing. But there was a bit in performing arts where we did samba, and we all got a samba drum, and they kind of taught us rhythm through these samba drums. Like they get two people with the same drum and be like, teach a rhythm, and they'd keep that rhythm going. Then they'd go, all right, next person, teach them a rhythm. They'd keep that going, and then eventually you'd have 30 kids all doing kind of like weird syncopated rhythms that worked really well together, like what actually happens with samba drumming. Then they'd have like a whistle that they'd blow to like signify different sections, and we'd do improvisation bits and solo bits, and that was really fun, and that's always stuck with me because it was really fun. I don't remember really having much fun other than that.
For like the majority of your music education, you don't really learn things that you're interested in. Like when we were like 11, 12, 13, all they taught in music was theory. And as a 11, 12, 13-year-old, unless you actively play an instrument, you don't really give a shit. Like, a much better way to teach it would be to take a song that kids know and tell them why it's so good, explain to them how it works and why it sounds like it does.
Or even how to replicate it.
Yeah.
So you do a poll and like 90% of the class really likes...
Justin Timberlake.
Really likes the new Justin Timberlake song. So you could do, as a class, be like, we're going to make a Justin Timberlake song. We're going to, from start to finish, make a new song that's kind of in the style of Justin Timberlake, and we could just do it as a group. In doing that, you would learn little bits about kind of how the chords work in that song, or how that harmony works, or a bit about vocal harmony, or a bit about putting together drums. And you could do bits where you change a section to be like, okay, so maybe, obviously this would be early on, so a teacher would be leading this the entire way. Like they could be like, okay, so let's do a different bridge section. What could we do? And you could brainstorm stuff and all that kind of, but that never gets done. You don't do that at school.
All you do
at all.
Practically in like the first few years of secondary school, at least what I did anyway, is they give you a little sheet of musical notes and they say, play that, you can perform it to the class at the end of the lesson. And most of us could never do it because none of us knew how to read sheet music, because we hadn't really listened, because it wasn't really engaging or interesting, and none of us really knew how to play keyboard, so we were all quite shit. We all played shit, we were all really nervous and worried about it, and we didn't enjoy it, and it turned a lot of people off of music, which is a bad thing.
Coming on to sheet music, I don't want to make a big point about this, because I think my opinion of sheet music is quite an extremist view for most people who are really into music, and anyone who comes through the educational system of music will disagree with me. You do not need to learn sheet music ever to have a successful career in music unless you're a session musician.
I would agree.
There's a lot of people that would disagree with me with that. Most of them will have come through, if not all of them, will have come through some form of traditional music teaching, whether that's done guitar lessons and learnt theory that way, and then done specific music theory exams. There are like 8 grades that you can do with music theory, or whether they've done a university degree based on music or anything like that. A lot of time is spent in those courses learning music theory.
No, because
We've worked in the music industry for like 3 years now. I mean, we've been a part of the industry for like 5, because at college we were learning about it, and we're part of it as a band. As
we've
kind of an
both been in
outsider.
bands for like 5, 6, 7 years now, and we've never needed it.
And I don't know a single person or a single instance in all the things that we've done, like gigs, festivals, synchronization in TV and film, radio, blogs, conferences, showcases.
Okay, that being said, out of all the musicians I have ever met, there's only ever been one instance where I've seen sheet music being actually used in practicality. And, you know, we have a band at the label called I Set the Sea on Fire. I work with them quite closely. They have a brass section. So they have a trumpeter, and they sometimes have an extra trombonist that comes in. This extra trombonist that comes in will always play off sheet music on a stand on stage. And that is because he's not a real member of the band. He just comes in as a session musician to learn and play on the spot. He If he was a part of the band, he wouldn't need that because he'd go to all the practices, he'd know all the songs off by heart. The reason that he has the sheet music is because he doesn't know the songs off by heart.
I think that's the thing, because orchestras and choirs and that kind of stuff maybe have hundreds to thousands of songs that they need to know off by heart, and they don't. And that's okay. That's far too much to know every intricacy of it. So they use sheet music. Totally fine. Choirs use it, orchestras use it, that side of thing. They use it, even though they're playing kind of like a regular kind of set list. They have so many songs, and they have so many intricacies in those songs that it wouldn't make sense to not have sheet music. And I'm not saying that they shouldn't know sheet music. People coming through the educational system, learning music, and the people that are interested in music, I'm going to say 80 to 90% of those kids don't give a shit about orchestras, don't give a shit about singing in choirs, and don't give a shit about reading sheet music. The learning of sheet music and stuff is kind of tailored towards the die-hard music fans, the people who are really into the classical music or really into really intricate, well-crafted stuff, which is cool, yeah, great. But the common person who wants to be learning music doesn't care.
Especially if you're a young kid, then you're just not going to give a shit. You're going to want to know how to play chuffing Rihanna or Kanye West or things like that. You're going to want to know how to play music that you like and that you can relate to. You don't care about Mozart or anything like that. You just want to play the music that you like.
And that's fine.
Yeah,
that's
it is.
Totally
it
fine.
Is.
That seems like if we were saying this to someone who teaches in schools and stuff, they'd be kind of sitting here and going, that sounds like a bad thing. Why do they want to listen to Kanye West? Rather than doing all this shit of like, okay, Kanye is not doing anything harmonically that's outstanding. Okay, that's fine. But he's selling more albums than classical composers are that are alive today. And people are more interested in Kanye West than they are in classical composers today.
Especially kids.
Yeah, especially the people that you're actually teaching this stuff to. Rather than being like, kids should be into this because it's impressive. No, teach them the things, they're already interested in it. I don't know a single kid that's not got a song on the phone or listens to music on YouTube or whatever. Even when we were kids and we had to shove in Bluetooth songs to each other, we did that because we enjoyed music. Not necessarily because we understood music or understood what was going on or even like the genres that would, the differences in the music that we listened to. We just enjoyed it. If the educational system took a hold of that and like taught you about the things that you liked and the common trends and how to make something that's like that and the sounds and the feeling and all that, that'd be so much better than just going, here's what Bach did.
Kids would be interested, and therefore, then kids would want to learn more about music. They'd understand Kanye West, they'd understand Rihanna, Kesha, all that shit, and they'd be like, right, I understand that now. I want to move on to other things. I want to learn how music works. It gets them interested. It gets them engaged with it, and that is the job of schools and teachers, is to make kids interested so they can learn. If kids are not interested in something, they're not going to learn. That is just a fact.
I think that's an assumption that's made when this course kind of comes about, is that you assume that kids have got a real interest in music and already have a mild basic knowledge of music. So then you start by going into detail about rhythm and meter and harmony and tonality and texture and melody and timbre and dynamics and structure and form, and then they're going to have this good knowledge of it, and then they're going to go on to college and they're going to get an even better knowledge of it, and then they're going to go to uni and they're going to get an even bigger knowledge, and then they're going to become like a whiz of music, and they're just going to know all the stuff to do with music, and it's going to be great. Except that's not how you get kids interested in music. You're turning them off before they've even started. If you go, you kids are interested in music, you chose to do music GCSE. Right. Here's how rhythm works. Fuck that. You're interested in music, let's listen to some music and let's replicate it and let's...
One of the problems, I think, lies with the fact that a lot of people say all the time that arts education is underfunded. It is underfunded because there's not as many kids that want to do it. There's not as many kids that want to do it because it's taught in a shit way.
And it's not even that the way that rhythm and meter is taught is bad, or the way that harmony and tonality is taught is bad. It's that the entire thing of teaching just that is bad. Use rhythm and meter as a thing to bounce off of when you're making songs or when you're analysing songs that the kids actually want to analyse in this curriculum that we're kind of looking at, which is the 2014 AQA music curriculum. I mean, I'll link to it in the description if you want to actually have a look at it, if you're not from the UK or whatever and kind of want to look at. This is essentially the exam criteria that I did for GCSE music. It's adapted because it's the 2014 version. I was leaving college that year, so this is 2 years after I did it, but it's almost exactly the same. Okay, so I guess we haven't really mentioned this. A thing that kind of happens in the GCSE music is you very often have to analyse or talk about a different piece of music, not one that you've written, and you have to answer certain questions about it. So you'll answer questions about rhythm and meter, or about harmony and tonality, or about texture and melody, or about timbre and dynamics, or about structure and form, but you will answer it about a song that someone else has written. Not a song of your choice, for obvious reasons, because it's an exam and the idea is that there's a set amount of songs that you should be doing. They split it up so that you might get a blues song, you might get popular music from the 1960s, you might get rock music, you might get R&B, you might get hip hop or whatever. One question that I got on my exam was, what group what name is given to this group? And it was a barbershop quartet. The song that was played was a barbershop quartet, and that was the answer to the question. But that's not actually all that helpful in music education.
What use is that to know that that's a barbershop quartet?
Yeah, I mean, granted, yeah, should kids know that barbershop quartets existed? Maybe. But there's much more interesting stuff that could be happening rather than teachers having to go, okay, so maybe something will come up in the exam that's, what's a quartet? So I'm going to have to teach them what a quartet is. Maybe it's going to be a barbershop quartet. I'll have to teach them what that is, what's samba, what's African drums, what's this, and then you end up spending maybe weeks teaching kids what different groups are called just so that they get 1 mark on an exam. I mean, this is a problem that I've had with education since chuffing year 10, is that a lot of the things that happens on tests, a lot of things that happens in teaching, in preparation for tests, aren't all that useful, except their preparations for tests. Like, there may be 1 of 5 questions may come up on the test. So we're going to extensively teach you the answers to all 5 of these questions, so that if 1 of them comes up, you get the marks. None of it's useful information, but I want you to get the marks.
I remember there was one time when we were in science, Leonard, and you asked something about space. We were learning about space, and you asked our teacher about it, and he said, "That's not on the exam. You don't need to know that." So he didn't teach it us, so we don't know it.
Yeah. I can't remember what that was, but I imagine I still don't know it.
No.
Maybe. If I do now know it, it's because I found a video on YouTube by someone like maybe Minute Physics or Vsauce that have done a video on it, and I've then learnt that thing. That is a really bad way of doing education, especially music education, because doing this is a really good way of making people not give a shit about music education. I'll give a bit of an example that's kind of as an outside perspective from this traditional thing. I did guitar lessons when I was younger, and the guy who taught me guitar, he'd done like grade 8 music theory, he'd got a degree in music, I think he'd got a master's in music. He knew his music theory very well, and he was very good at it. And as I was getting better at guitar and learning the basics of music theory, I learned it better through him than I did through school. The little bit of music theory that I'd learned, I was kind of building on with him as opposed to school, because one-to-one teaching is always better anyway. He always wanted to kind of keep me going with the music theory, doing better and better. He even mentioned one point, we could start doing the music theory grades. We could start you on grade 5, and you just kind of do the music grades, because then you've got some qualifications under your belt for the things that you're learning. Which is great, but we got to a point and I was like, the problem here, Pete, is all this thing I'm never going to use. I don't care about this thing that we're learning here and how to read sheet music while playing. Like one of the things on music theory grades is that you are given a sheet of music that you will have never seen before, and you have to play that music just by reading the sheet music. which is great. And anyone who has the skill of being able to do that, to actually read sheet music like reading a book, that's an amazing skill. But I knew that that would never help me. I didn't want to be a session musician or have anything where I had to read sheet music. I have always wanted to play music that I enjoy or that I specifically write, and I'm willing to take the time to learn those songs so that I don't need the sheet music. I wasn't interested. So I told him, I'm not interested, let's not do it, let's move on to something interesting. You can't do that in thingy education. You have to do it. You're forced to do it because it's school, which means that just turns people off. I had the choice to go, I don't want to learn this, so I didn't. And I'm happy with music now, and I have the skills that I wanted to build, and I don't have the skills I didn't want to build. You don't have that luxury when you're doing traditional education, and I'm not saying that we should give the choice to kids as to whether or not to learn music theory or not. I'm saying we shouldn't teach music theory to kids, not how to read and write music.
Now, if they want to learn it at a later date, then by all means teach them, but don't force it down the throat when they're 11 or 12, because they don't care.
I'd still argue that I'm 20, nearly 21, and I don't care, because especially since I've now spent a decent amount of time in the industry, I know that I don't need it. Me learning it would be solely so that I could just build a skill with no practical use. Maybe if I had the skill, I would find a use for it, and maybe I'd compose songs and then actually write it in proper.
Maybe you'd write good music.
Nah, I doubt it. I think it'd take more than that for me to write good music. To argue that learning how sheet music looks is kind of the only way to kind of give a physical representation of music is no longer true. Because a much more useful way to show music is MIDI. Because you've got length of note, which is shown in a much more physical representation. The longer the note, rather than
having like 4 dots on it or something.
Yeah, rather than having a dot with a line, but if that line has got another line on it, it's half the length. If it's got 2 lines on it, it's a quarter of the length. If it's got 3 lines on it, it's an eighth of the length. Rather than do all that shit, if it's half the length, it lasts half the length. The relationship between notes and whether it's a sharp or a flat is just represented by the colour of the bar as it goes across in MIDI. That's just... It's how a piano's laid out, but in a vertical form.
And it's much better. It's clear. And understandable.
And it has a use. Because if you want to compose a piano piece, you can do that with MIDI. You don't even need to know how to play piano. Provided you don't even need to know the notes. You could sit somewhere in front of MIDI and have them come up with a song once you kind of tell them that left to right is time, up, down is the different notes. You press this button to draw it on, press play and it'll show you what you've got. I'm pretty sure anyone, even like an 80-year-old grandparent, could probably kind of understand how it works. If they already know how a mouse works and kind of the basics of how a computer works, I'm confident that anyone could use MIDI. Can't say the same for music, sheet music.
No.
And sheet music is slowly becoming more and more obsolete as general knowledge. Because we have MIDI, and we've had a MIDI for a while, all it needs to do now is have it actually implemented into the educational system as opposed to sheet music, and it'll take off and be far more interesting because it actually has practical uses. As well as that's a really good way of teaching the intro to sampling and how samplers work, and that you can, with a keyboard, play drums. That's an option. You can play drums with a keyboard. And you do it through MIDI.
It would be a hell of a lot easier if they taught MIDI, wouldn't it?
It would. In the general educational system, MIDI is in there, but it's at a later date. It's get taught at like A-level levels. I mean, we did a level 3 diploma, and it was a part of that we learned MIDI then. But if MIDI was implemented beforehand, in the actual writing of music and the teaching of music theory and how to replicate songs and all the stuff that we've already talked about today, if MIDI was implemented with that to 7-year-olds, not to 7-year-olds, to people in year 7 or 11-year-olds or whatever,
they'd understand it more. They'd get more enjoyment out of it, which means they'd want to carry on with music education, which means that more children want to carry on with music education, which would in turn mean that music education would be better funded and just better in general.
A lot of year 7 and year 8, so when we were 11, 12, 13, a lot of it was kind of spent teaching everyone how to play keyboard. Because in order to play these jingles that we'd written, or to even write the jingles themselves, we kind of had to have a basic knowledge of keyboard, because they didn't trust us playing the guitars and there wasn't enough guitars to go around the entire class. And they were the only 2 instruments that the school owned. So everyone had to kind of learn a basic of keyboard. If you taught MIDI, you could just skip that step. No one needs to know how to play an instrument or have any technique or skill to learn how music works, which is what it's supposed to be about. So as we're probably not gonna see this structure of teaching or method or anything like that implemented in the mainstream, we are gonna have to settle for it being on YouTube, but we're doing the best that we can, and the channel's growing really nicely, and obviously that's awesome. The more that we can kind of get more people interested in learning music in a different way, maybe at some point in the future we can try and influence how the mainstream kind of music teaching is done. Whether we ever get to do that would be, if we get 4 million subscribers, I'm saying a milestone now, at 4 million subscribers, we're gonna do something to our government or some shit, so that we can try and get reform in the music educational system in this country. That's a pledge. So please share this video on Facebook and MySpace to try and get us to 4 million subscribers. In all seriousness, next week we're going to do a video just showing up other music channels that exist on YouTube that you should probably check out, because they're doing really cool stuff and teaching in different ways to how school teaches. And that's cool, because in theory, all of you that are still in the educational system, I get that there's a lot of you that have left the educational system, and I guess you've already been through it and maybe have the same kind of frustrations that we have. But for all of you that are still in the educational system in your country, and obviously they will vary from country to country, having these YouTube channels that we recommend alongside your education can only help. So next week we will make an entire video on channels that you should probably be watching. As much as we try and cater for all avenues of songwriting and stuff, other people have different knowledge and have time to make either more complex videos or just different styles of videos or whatever. So on the screen there will be a series. I think it's going to be the industry, because I think we're going to put this video in the industry.
I think that's a fair assumption to make.
As much as we said the industry was going to be only for Wednesday's videos, this felt kind of a big-ish topic that kind of deserves Saturday. But it is more about the industry than becoming a band or sharpening your songwriting or anything like that. So check out that. There's also a best of playlist on the screen. Check out that if you want to see our best of videos. They are much more entertaining than this video. Have a good day. See you next week.